Imagine walking through a bustling medieval market when suddenly you spot a man shuffling by with a giant wooden barrel strapped around his body. The crowd points and laughs, and children run alongside him, jeering. He's not selling ale, he's wearing the drunkard's cloak, a humiliating punishment for those caught in public drunkenness. The Middle Ages were full of punishments like this, designed not just to punish but to humiliate, to make an unforgettable example of the offender in front of the whole community. Justice back then wasn't about quiet courtrooms or legal appeals. It was public, noisy, and often absurd. Some punishments were so strange, you'd think they were made up for a dark comedy, but they were all too real. Take the shame mask, for example. If you were a gossiper, liar, or troublemaker, you might find yourself wearing an iron mask shaped like a donkey, pig, or devil. Sometimes bells were attached so people would hear you coming and gather to watch you shuffle by, unable to speak. Then there was the brank, a cage of metal straps locked around your head with a plate that pressed down on your tongue. If you tried to talk, it would hurt, badly. These punishments worked because the worst thing you could suffer wasn't pain, it was public ridicule. The whole village knew you'd been caught, and they wouldn't let you forget it, but not all punishments were about wearing odd contraptions. Some involved terrifying experiences designed to test your innocence, or, in reality, to condemn you no matter what. Dunking stools were a favorite for those accused of witchcraft or for women labeled as scolds. You'd be tied to a chair and dunked repeatedly into a river or pond. Supposedly, if you floated, it meant you were guilty. Of course, if you sank and drowned, you weren't guilty, just dead. This was punishment and spectacle rolled into one, with the crowd roaring as each dunk sent up a spray of cold water. Animals, too, weren't safe from medieval justice. Believe it or not, pigs, goats, and even rats could be put on trial. They'd be dressed in human clothes, led into a courtroom, and formally charged. Lawyers would be appointed to defend them, but the verdict was almost always guilty. The idea was that even animals had to follow the rules, and punishing them would deter others, though exactly how a pig was supposed to spread the word to its friends is anyone's guess. And then there was trial by ordeal, the ultimate test of faith, or superstition. Imagine being told to carry a red-hot iron bar for several paces or plunge your hand into boiling water. After a few days, a priest would inspect the burns. If they healed cleanly, you were innocent. If they festered, you were guilty. It's no wonder the innocent and guilty alike feared these trials. They weren't tests of truth, they were tests of how much suffering you could endure before fate, or infection, decided your fate. That in a world where law and religion were deeply intertwined, punishments weren't just about crime, they were about sending a message. If you lied, stole, or challenged authority, you wouldn't just be fined, you'd be shamed, hurt, and made into a lesson for everyone else. Sometimes these punishments worked. Sometimes they made things worse. But they always left an impression. Now, if medieval justice was a theater of humiliation and pain, the ancient Romans had their own brand of spectacle, one that played out in front of tens of thousands, with swords, shields, and roaring crowds. Roman gladiators weren't just fighters, they were the rock stars of their day. Yet behind the fame was a brutal reality: gladiators didn't start as heroes. Many were slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals. Their journey began in the ludus, the gladiator school, where they were trained like elite athletes. Life there was strict, a high-protein diet of barley and beans to bulk up, constant drills to perfect fighting techniques, and strict discipline to ensure obedience. There were different types of gladiators, each with their own weapons and armor: the Mirmillo with his heavy shield and sword, the Retiarius with his net and trident, the Secutor with a smooth helmet designed to trap his opponent. Every fight was as much a show as it was a battle. On the day of the games, the arena was transformed into a grand stage. The crowd roared as gladiators marched in during the Pampa, the opening parade. Fights began with mock battles or animal hunts, followed by the main events, gladiator against gladiator, man against beast. Contrary to popular belief, not every fight ended in death. Skilled gladiators were valuable, and killing them too quickly wasn't good for business. The thumbs up and thumbs down gesture we imagine from movies wasn't exactly how it worked, but the crowd's approval, or disapproval, could indeed decide a man's fate. Some gladiators became household names, their faces painted on walls, their victories celebrated in taverns, their likeness sold as trinkets. Women admired them, men envied them, and politicians used them as tools to win favor with the masses. A victorious gladiator could earn the rudis, a wooden sword symbolizing his freedom. But the truth was harsh, most never lived long enough to see it. Even the champions who walked away from the arena carried scars for life. The roar of the crowd, the clash of steel, and the glory of victory made the games intoxicating. But Rome didn't only celebrate its heroes in the arena. Sometimes it celebrated its victories on an even grander stage, one where no blood was spilled, at least, not during the event itself. This was the Roman triumph, a victory parade like nothing else in history, where the general, not the gladiator, was the star. That story, though, is for the next part, and it will take us right into the heart of Rome's most spectacular celebration. Picture the streets of ancient Rome completely transformed, not for a market, not for a religious festival, but for one man's moment of glory. A Roman triumph wasn't just a parade, it was the ultimate honor a general could receive, a celebration so extravagant that it could make or break political careers. The Senate had to approve it, and only a general who had won a decisive victory, killed at least 5,000 enemies, and ended a war could even be considered. When that approval came, preparations began immediately, because a triumph was as much about spectacle as it was about history. On the big day, the city shut down. Crowds gathered along the streets, climbing onto rooftops and balconies to catch a glimpse. First came the captured treasure, carts overflowing with gold, silver, and exotic goods looted from conquered lands. Next marched the prisoners of war, sometimes entire royal families, chained but dressed in their finest clothes for maximum effect. Behind them came exotic animals, lions, elephants, leopards, brought to amaze the people and prove Rome's reach across the world. Soldiers followed, singing bawdy songs about their commander's bravery and occasionally poking fun at him to show camaraderie. Then, finally, the general himself appeared, riding in a chariot pulled by 4 white horses, wearing a purple robe embroidered with gold, a crown of laurel on his head, and holding a scepter. Behind him stood a slave who whispered into his ear, "Remember, you are mortal," a reminder not to let victory turn into arrogance. The procession ended at the Temple of Jupiter, where sacrifices were made to thank the gods for their favor. Afterward, the real party began, feasts, games, and sometimes executions of the most important prisoners, sealing Rome's dominance. Triumphs were more than victory parades, they were political theater. They told Rome's citizens that their leaders were powerful, their armies invincible, and their gods on their side. But they also served another purpose: they kept the people entertained and united, even if the glory was fleeting. And if the triumph was grand enough, it could be remembered for centuries. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, where grand displays of victory took a different form. The Crusades were brutal campaigns fought across distant lands, and when crusaders returned victorious, they didn't just rest, they celebrated in style. Crusader feasts were not casual affairs, they were carefully staged displays of wealth, unity, and divine favor, and they were a welcome break from the hardships of war. Life on crusade was relentless. Food was often scarce, and what was available was plain, hardtack bread, salted meat, and thin gruel. Water was unreliable, so wine or ale was safer to drink. Days were spent marching under the burning sun or huddling in makeshift camps under cold, damp skies. But when victory came, everything changed. The leaders of the crusade would arrange a feast that could last for hours, sometimes even days. Large tents were erected, their interiors draped with bright fabrics and lit with flickering torches. Long wooden tables were laid out, with places assigned by rank, kings, nobles, and high-ranking knights at the head, with lesser warriors and attendants further down. The food was a statement in itself: roasted whole animals, steaming platters of spiced rice, pies filled with game and fruit, and bread still warm from the ovens. The Crusaders brought home exotic spices like cinnamon, cloves, and saffron from their travels, adding flavors that most in Europe had never tasted. These banquets were a rare chance for common soldiers to enjoy luxuries they could never afford. The drink flowed freely: wine imported from southern vineyards, mead made from honey, and strong ale. Minstrels played lutes and fiddles, jesters told outrageous stories, and troubadours sang of legendary battles and loves lost and found. Between courses, knights recounted their own adventures, each tale a little more heroic than the last. The mood was light, but the symbolism was heavy. This was a celebration not just of survival, but of unity, of divine blessing, and of the belief that their cause was just. For leaders, these feasts were also political tools. They rewarded loyalty, cemented alliances, and reminded everyone who was in command. Gifts were exchanged: fine fabrics, weapons, horses, and toasts were made in honor of the dead. It was a reminder that while victory was sweet, it came at a cost. That as the night wore on, the feasts blurred the line between celebration and ritual. Meat from the banquet was sometimes distributed to the poor, a public display of generosity. Performers might act out the battles in crude comedic plays, letting the soldiers laugh at the dangers they'd faced. And when the torches finally burned low, many guests staggered back to their tents, full of food, drink, and the certainty that they had lived through something extraordinary. From the bizarre punishments of the Middle Ages to the blood-soaked glory of the Roman arena, from the grandeur of the triumph to the indulgence of Crusader feasts, one thing remains constant throughout history: public spectacle has always been a powerful tool. Whether meant to punish, to inspire fear, to glorify, or to unite, these events shaped how people saw themselves and their leaders. In the end, history is filled with moments where the line between justice, entertainment, and propaganda blurred, leaving us stories that are as strange as they are unforgettable.